Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Faith Chats, where our topic is always about faith, family, freedom, and America. Today, my guest is Chad Prather of the Chad Prather Show. He's a humorist, and man, I just love this guy altogether, and you're going to love him too. Welcome to the program, Chad.
Buddy, it's good to be with you, man. Thanks for having me on. How's everything going over in your neck of the woods?
Well, it's a rainy day here, but you know what? It's still good.
Yeah, it's rainy day here too. We're about 3 days in on that, and I was walking outside taking some trash out a little while ago, and I said, I'd kind of be okay if the sun came out.
You know, as long as we're not sitting around watching CNN, we're blessed.
You know what? I was on an airplane coming home Sunday, and there was a guy in front of me on the airplane, and I could see he had it on his phone. He was watching CNN, and I was like, man, I can't believe that I found somebody in the wild that was choosing to watch that by choice. So I guess they're out there.
Not me.
Me either. Me either.
So, anybody that knows about you knows that you love comedy. So, what's one unremarkable moment from your childhood that sparked your love for finding comedy in the ordinary?
Oh man, I don't know. I have to think about that. Let's see. I grew up I grew up the youngest of two other brothers. So there's three boys, and I was 10 years younger. So it was almost like being an only child. And so my brothers, they tormented me quite a bit, and as older brothers are supposed to do. And my brothers used to play pranks on my mother. Like they had like a severed hand, and then they had like a head off of a mannequin, and they would hide that around the house. Like when she would come she'd be home alone, going back there to take the laundry back to their bedroom, and they'd have that hand sticking out of the closet, or they'd have that head sitting on top of a lot of people wouldn't find that funny. She definitely didn't find it funny, but we got a big old kick out of scaring her. And my mother used to say all the time that she was going to get us back. So every now and then that she was a trickster herself. Now we'd come home, I'd come home from school, and she'd be laying there in the floor acting like she was dead, right? Like couldn't get her to move. I'm like, man, that's morbid, right? And so we'd have to go there and tickle her to make her wake up and quit messing with us. And I used to say one day when I look at her at her funeral, I'm gonna remind her of when she used to play dead. I'm gonna say, well, she looks natural. Pretty morbid family, man.
One thing that I do want to cover today is the Candace Owens controversy that is constantly going on with her thoughts on Charlie Kirk. What's your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Well, there's this kind of we're living in the age of influencers, right? And the thing is, Candace she may not always be right, but she is always loud. And you know, I think that wisdom and discernment doesn't shout. I think it whispers. And I'm all for pursuing knowledge and truth. I really am for all of that. But it also, and I've known Candace for a long time, and I wish she would use a little bit more discretion in the way that she's gone about this. But to keep teasing everybody that she's got information or something's coming and then never dropping anything, I have a problem with that. And I also think, there's time to uncover some things and immediately after the tragic death of a young man like Charlie, who also was a friend of mine. It's not maybe it wasn't the best timing on that. And I'll tell you this, truth doesn't need a conspiracy to be powerful. It doesn't need that. It doesn't need, truth stands on its own. And I think the truth is out there. And I think there's enough people looking for it that we don't have to twist a tragedy into a narrative to try to make our voice matter. And so I think everybody needs to be careful, whether they agree with Candace or not. We need to be careful because when the world is kind of shouting, "Listen to me," we need to be still a little bit and see what God's saying to us.
I believe, though, the murder of Charlie Kirk really showed us that freedom of speech is not really that in America.
Yeah. Well, what you say comes with consequences. We've always known that. And as a comedian and somebody that gets on a stage multiple times a week, I stand in front of a lot of strangers. And so you never know who's out there that you've made mad or angry or who comes to do you harm or something like that. And, I don't think that everything is on the up and up with Charlie's assassination. I don't think we're being told the complete and total truth on that. But I don't know. I mean, I can chase ideas and chase whispers through the woods all day long. But at the end of the day, I miss my friend and I miss his voice and I wish it hadn't happened. And you have to realize that there's going to be a price for taking a stand and speaking the truth, because we live in a world that takes absolutes. So if you talk about your faith in absolutes, you talk about truth in absolutes, you talk about any of that, you're going to be called narrow-minded. You're going to be called bigoted. You're going to be called a hate speech person, a Nazi, a fascist, all the labels. And it's because we live in a world, in a society that thinks that absolutes are hate speech, and they're not. So I think we have to speak the truth, but we have to do it knowing that the truth is going to have consequences, and it's not always going to be favorable.
And I seen your post on Facebook about the situation that you had at a venue just this past week with a bartender.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we were backstage. We were in a pretty woke place. I was surprised they actually booked us to come in there. But it'd been on the books for a little while, and I knew where it was. I knew what part of town it was in. It was in Dallas, and I knew where in Dallas we were going to be going. And I thought, man, it's unusual, but hey, it's a good thing. Maybe they're reaching across and they're getting some other people in that have a different viewpoint on things, and that's okay, because regardless of politics, what I care about is your professionalism, because we got to share this space, right? We got to share this world, and I'm not going to agree with everybody. They're not going to agree with me, and that's okay. But we should still be able to get along. So I was excited about at least that. And there were some people at the bar that were talking to the bartender, and they kept looking over at the ladies that sell merch for us, T-shirts and hats and what have you. And they have our messaging on there. And they said, well, I didn't know I was going to come to work, and we were going to have to be selling pedophile merch. And of course, that's kind of the name du jour right now, the accusation du jour of what they're referring to Trump and any of his supporters. We're all just pedophile protectors or something all over the Epstein list. And I just when they sent me a message, my merch girl sent me a message and said, this is what's being said out here. We went to the GM and we just said, why don't you dismiss that person for tonight and tomorrow night while we're here? Because we really don't need that. And he agreed. And so he did that. Well, the guy ended up showing out pretty bad, and they ended up firing him. And I think they were actually happy to fire him, because apparently this wasn't the first time he was problematic. And so I think the venue handled it well, even though I know they don't agree with me on my philosophies of life, and that's okay. But they were gracious about it. And there was a little bit of uproar on it online by just mentioning it. And the only reason I put it out there is because I want to remind people that there has to be consequences. You can let some things slide, but there really
Right.
does need to be some consequences when you start tossing inflammatory accusations towards people, because, using words like pedophile and things like that, that's a pretty strong thing to put out. And there you need to be held accountable for that, because those types of accusations can't stand. And so that's what happened. I mean, it got handled the way it should have, but it's getting to be a pretty dangerous world out there, man, in terms of what we're dealing with, both with the rhetoric, and we've learned with Charlie that rhetoric on both sides can really cause some retaliation that's deadly and dangerous.
And the thing about it is, and I stand with Vice President J.D. Vance on this, but when you can praise a murder
Yeah.
of somebody like Charlie Kirk, yeah, you deserve to lose your job.
Yeah, Pam Bondi came out a couple of weeks ago and she kind of walked it back, talking about they were going to go after people who were engaging in hate speech. I don't believe there is such a thing as hate speech. I believe there's free speech and there's critical thinking. Now, you can say stuff that's stupid, and there should be consequences to the stupid things you say, because just because you have a right to say it doesn't make it right when you say it. And so you have to be careful with those kind of things. But when we start labeling things hate speech, you got a problem. There's already laws against defamation and libel and those types of things, or threats of violence. There's already laws against that. But just because I say a phrase that turns you off, I mean, I can say Jesus is Lord or Jesus is King, and Christianity is the only way to heaven, and Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And somebody could just decide on that slippery slope that that's hate speech because I'm speaking in those types of absolutes. It's not hate speech. It's just up to you to decide what to do with it. I get people all the time that say some pretty rough things to me, but I don't take them as hate speech. But there still should be consequences. You're celebrating, the death of a father and a husband and a a leader in our country and a thought leader and a voice that led a movement. Yeah, I mean, you should have a little more class and wisdom than that, and the consequences that come. The chips are going to fall where they are, and I think we're starting to see that happen a whole lot faster in recent days since Charlie's death than what has happened maybe in the past.
So you're frequently compared to Will Rogers as a modern day cowboy philosopher. How has Rogers' blend of wit and wisdom influenced your own style of observational humor and political commentary?
Yeah, I always found that fascinating when people would say that. And actually, Will Rogers' family, his granddaughter, they called me on the phone a number of years ago, and they actually came to one of my shows out in California where they were, and brought me some Will Rogers memorabilia and some of his books and things like that. And they said, we think it's an honor that you kind of carry that title. I've always said I don't know if I could, carry Will Rogers underwear. I mean, he was quite the man and quite the entertainer and quite the thinker himself as a humorist and a kind of a cowboy poet and philosopher. He was a Democrat, but that's back when Democrats were fair-minded and traditional liberalism was a whole different thing. But he considered himself a Democrat, but he was also a political guy who poked a lot of fun at his own party as well as the political system that was in America today at that time. But it's quite an honor because what I take away from that is hopefully it's just sharing some common sense. And what you do is you take common sense, wrap it in humor, and try to make it a little bit easier pill to swallow. And so I've kind of patterned somewhat of my voice at times, most of the time, I think, after somebody who says, I'm going to tell you the truth, that if you listen to it, you'll be entertained by it. And sometimes these days, truth is a little bit inflammatory, but I've even tried to do my public shows a little more variety type of shows like Will Rogers did. So, it's quite an honor to get called that. I think there's other people that deserve that moniker far more than me, but yeah, I think the world needs a little bit of humor. I think we need a little bit of down home, some of that homespun humor and some of that cowboy philosophy out there to maybe help us tolerate the world we're living in, and we need more of it.
So your YouTube videos went viral early on, turning you into an internet sensation. Looking back, what's the one video or routine that surprised you the most in terms of audience reaction, and why do you think it resonated?
Well, the one that resonated so much that a lot of people know me for was Unapologetically Southern. That's not the one that I thought was going to go crazy viral and be as well known, but I sat in my truck one day. That was 2015, and we were kind of the news headlines of that moment where everybody was coming after the Confederate monuments and the Confederacy, or the South was known as. People were saying it was ignorant. There was just this big attack on Southern heritage and Southern history going on at the time, and I had done some videos sitting in my truck, and they'd gone viral. A lot of people had seen them, and I got a message one day where somebody said, we don't even have to listen to you because we can hear your accent. We know you're from the South, basically. And so you must be ignorant and there's no point in listening to you. So I pulled over on the side of the road. I actually pulled in my driveway and just kind of off the cuff rattled off that, 2.5 minute rant, and didn't think anything of it. I knew a lot of people had watched it, but I didn't know that it had gone viral in the way that it had on YouTube. And so, yeah, it kind of launched a lot of things for me. It opened up some doors into the media realm again, and put me on places like Fox News and CNN and MSN, a lot of those things back in the day before they were so divided as much as we are now. But that one surprised me. I was actually on my way I was on the highway when Fox News called me on the phone. Well, actually, I'll tell you what happened. Somebody sent me a message and they said, "Hey, you're on Fox News." And I was like, "Which affiliate?" Because I just figured it was a local affiliate because I was getting a lot of that at that point. And they said, "No, you're on the actual Fox News." So I jumped up and went in there, and Fox and Friends, Tucker Carlson was one of the hosts of Fox and Friends at the time. And and they were talking about that particular video. So I don't know. It was kind of humbling. It was an honor. It was a kind of surreal moment to see that. But yeah, it just kind of sent me off into a trajectory of saying, this is what I do. I run my mouth, and I guess I'm thankful that some people are listening to it and at least sharing it from time to time.
So you perform stand up, hosted radio shows, and now run the Chad Prather Show podcast. What's the biggest difference in connecting with an audience live on stage through a microphone or screen?
Well, you get immediate feedback when you're on a stage. And it depends on what kind of stage you're on. If you're in a big theater with thousands of people out there, sometimes that reaction is coming out of a dark room because the lights are in your face and you can't even see them. And then maybe you're in a comedy club where you're sitting there right there in front of somebody. They're right there eating their chicken nuggets in front of you, and you could put your foot out and step on their table if you wanted to. And that response is a little more immediate. Social media is sort of a risk because you can put stuff out and put content, put a video out there, whether it's a podcast or just a short video or clip or something like that. And you're not quite sure for a little while how people are going to respond to it. I've put videos out there that I forgot I put out there. And then I find out 6 weeks later that they're going viral. And there's a whole group of people out there that are ready to crucify me and, string me up. So you don't really know what's going to come. You don't know how people are going to respond or react, but that's the risk that it takes. That's actually the risk of comedy. That's the risk of free thinking. You put stuff out there, you don't know how the general public's going to take it or react. And I've put my foot in my mouth a number of times, but by and large, I've stayed consistent with my convictions and the things that I believe. And so whether I'm on a live stage or on a podcast, then, it's, I just hope people are listening and it's resonating with people. And, in my case, I hope it's making them laugh and think. We started another show a couple of months ago that I'm doing weekday mornings called Before the Noise. And we've got about 13,000 people watching that live each morning. So that can be a little intimidating if you think about that many people tuned in to what you're saying as we're doing our Bible studies, because that's kind of what that's the basis of. And we're working through and just looking at scripture. I always look at it as my devotional time. I just do it out loud where other people can see it. And so if you think about it, you're like, I really want to say what I'm trying to say the right way so I don't, catch a lot of crap because of it later on. But so if you're on a live stage, the response is immediate. If you're doing it online, it might be a little bit delayed, but people have a way of telling you how they feel about it. That's for sure.
So, what has been a memorable experience for you through hosting the Chad Prather podcast?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's been a number of the guests and the people that I've been able to connect to, because I do that show. I've been in the Oval Office. I've been with the president numerous times. I've been invited to the White House numerous times. I get to go to Mar-a-Lago. I visited a number of places, been in some rubbed shoulders a little bit with some folks that I never think I would have had that opportunity to do if I didn't have that sphere of influence. So people ask me quite often about doing a podcast. They say, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. Do you think I should? And I say, I think everybody should have a podcast. I think since you've got that platform and that opportunity out there to get your voice out there amplified, even if you've got a couple of people listening to you, I mean, Jesus had 12 disciples and one of those was a bad egg. So, if you got a dozen people listening to you, I'd say that's pretty successful in terms of what you can reproduce in other people's lives if you're thoughtfully and prayerfully putting that information out there with a critically thinking. And I think that everybody should get their voice out there. If nothing else, it saves it for, it saves a legacy for you of the things that you've said, something your kids can hold on to. And, it's kind of recorded for all time. And I know that we live in a day and age where that can get you in a lot of trouble. If you say the wrong thing, it can come back to bite you. But no, I think that it's been a blessing to be able to make a living just running my mouth. I've tried it. I've done the manual labor at 52 years of age. I don't mind talking as much as I do, but I probably talk more than most men should. That's for sure. I think women are good at talking a lot and men are good at learning how to shut up, or we should be. And we don't say as many words in a day, but I'm doing the morning show. I'm doing the Chad Prather show. And then I'll do a show like yours. And then, when we're done here, I'll jump on Sarah Gonzalez's show over on the Blaze. So, yeah, it's a lot of talking and you're blessed to do it and thankful to have the platform. But, it's opened a lot of doors, man. And the exciting thing about all of it is you don't even know what's coming next. You never know what a day is going to bring, and that's some pretty exciting stuff.
What about a memorable guest that you've had?
Oh gosh, I've had so many of them. I mean, it's kind of a who's who. I've had a bunch of people. Charlie Kirk was a guest on the show quite a few times, and Charlie and I were friends. And Candace Owens has been on there. I mean, all these people that you name, I've had them on there. And then I think about the people in the world of comedy that I've had on. I've had some really big names there. I remember Dennis Miller coming on and his insight on culture in the world and his funny, insightful, and really intelligent way of doing it. And then some of the podcasts I've been able to be on, which have been, nationally and internationally acclaimed. So it's just every conversation is different, and then you go to the people that a lot of people have never heard of. Sometimes those are the most insightful things. We just recorded a small episode yesterday with a guest who is he's a lobbyist in Washington D.C. And my producer, when we were done, he goes, man, you don't pay me enough, dude. That was so boring. And I was like, no, you're used to watching people fight in the streets. You're used to that stuff that goes viral. This was some critically thought out stuff that the world really needs to hear. And so I enjoy those kind of conversations because I learn from them. They're insightful. And, you might have the big headline names, but at the end of the day, I think everybody, again, I go back to the podcast point, everybody's got a voice. Everybody's got something to say. Everybody's got a story. And if we can tell those stories, the more we can do, I think the bigger blessing it is.
So, we were talking about news headlines and the thing
Mhm.
that's going on in California right now with the threat of arresting ICE agents. Is that not crazy to you?
Yeah, I've said forever that, and I, I've often said, we got men and women that put a badge on their chest and they get ready and they go out and they kiss their families goodbye and they go out and work on a shift, just to do their job. They've taken an oath to protect the public safety and to keep some order in our streets. And there's bad cops, there's bad doctors out there, but we still go to them, right? But again, by and large, there are people that just want to do their job. And for us to do what's happened, where you're going to dehumanize and villainize somebody to the point where violence is being enacted upon them, or you're going to call for their arrest or some kind of a consequence for them just doing their job. It's really shameful that that's where we've come to as a society. And I will add, there's not a society that's going to last very long with that type of mentality towards those people that have taken that oath.
Do you believe it's part of the control that the state's under by Newsom?
Well, there's no question. It's, our country and some of the states, our governments, whether they're state or federal, they're being run by bureaucrats, right? And then you have some states that are worse than others. Illinois is one of them, and Washington, Oregon, California. What I mean by bureaucrats, I mean the people that are appointed, not elected. And so you have these guys that get in office and they appoint all these bureaucrats to do all their, to do their bidding. And those people aren't accountable to anybody except to that person who's in power, like a Gavin Newsom. So, there's a lot of folks that are putting bugs in his ear and trying to guide him and push his woke policies even further. And California really has kind of become a cesspool. You look at what's going on in New York with Zohran Mamdani. If he becomes mayor, New York's about to become a cautionary tale. It's going to be that place that we drive by and point and say, "Hey, kids, that's what happens when you do that." Like that's it's going to be like communist Fidel Castro's Cuba. It's going to be like Venezuela. It's going to be like North Korea. It's going to be that place that you point to and you go, not good. It's going to be like Iran and how it's progressed under the Ayatollah. Is not good. New York City is about to become that. California is in a lot of ways that. You go to a big city in California, you'll see exactly what I mean. So, yeah, it's the bureaucrats, man. And they're just pushing these progressive policies that are being enacted by these guys that are figureheads and pushing for power like Gavin Newsom. And the people who get hosed are the average tax-paying citizens out there that just want to be left alone.
And that's the way that it is, I mean, what you said, the taxpayers wanting to be left alone, and then you
Yeah.
got people that just want to intimidate and aggravate them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we really do. I want I'm a small government, limited government conservative. I think that government begins with the individual and it extends to the home, and from the home to the community. And then, then we can start worrying about the cities and the states and what happens inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C. But right now, I got to govern myself. If I'm not governing myself, I mean, that's as limited of a government as you can get right there is self-government. And, God gave me certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. John Locke talked about the principles of freedom of being life, liberty, and property. Those are pretty simple things. And so if I really want to break it down into what my desires are, I want life, liberty, and property. I want to be able to work as hard as I can, make as much money as I can, be able to keep as much of it as I can. And when it's all said and done, watch my kids grow up, have a legacy with grandchildren, and I can sit there in my older years and maybe drink a beer on the front porch and watch those grandkids play in the front yard with the government leaving me alone. I don't have to pay those property taxes. I don't have to keep renting what I own from the government. And I die a happy man. And I've lived with knowing where I came from. I lived knowing who I was, where I was going, and what I was going to leave behind. And the government's doing everything to destroy our history and our identity and our destiny and our legacy. Our education systems are doing that as well. And it's really a tragedy that we live in a country that we have to fight for that, but we do have to fight for it. And that fight's very real.
That's a whole nother show that we could talk about the education system and how they're
Yeah.
brainwashing our kids through communism and socialism and allowing drag queens to come to story hour. I
Yeah.
mean, we could go on and on.
It's true. It's true. But that's the world we're living in.
And I mean, it's sad. And back to what we was talking about, praising the murder of Charlie Kirk. I mean, most of them were teachers.
Well, and let me just tell you. So a buddy of mine who's a comedian, he's opened for me for the last 6 years, Jesse Payton. He just sent me a screenshot from his phone. It just popped up. And I won't read all of it, but he just got a message from someone on his Instagram that said, "You're as funny as Charlie Kirk's being shot in the neck." And then he goes on and he just keeps going and keeps going and going. And so pretty harsh words right here. And you have these people that are saying all of that. And they're using words that that you can get away with a lot of stuff on the keyboards, right? You never would say something like that to somebody's face. And we've built this society of people that say whatever they want to say without any sense of personal responsibility. And we got to get back to personal responsibility because the end result of that is consequentially very tragic. And the internet has been one big it's been one big sociological experiment that's really defined us in a way that I don't think is always healthy. It could be the death of all of us because it's not social and it's not media. But people are willing to say a lot of hateful things out there. And it's amazing to me that they do that. I mean, just the other day, there was the guy, Moises Bertal, who was in Chicago. He was on the megaphone, on the microphone at the No Kings rally saying that everybody's got to arm up and they need to wipe out all the ICE agents. Well, he's been fired from his job at Chicago community colleges. But he needs to be legally held accountable for that too. I mean, that's a threat of violence. That is actually calling for acts of terrorism against law enforcement agents. That's not right. And that's not okay. But you would think that these people who are in a position of pushing around academic papers in a college setting and forming and shaping the minds of our future leaders, future citizens, you would think that people like that would be smarter than that. But again, even they've been living in a world without consequences. And that's just unfortunate, and that's where we're living.
Well, Chad, thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed talking with you. You're welcome back anytime, my friend.
Brother, thank you for having me on, man. It's a blessing to get to know you, hang out with you, spend time with you. If I can ever do anything for you, let me know, reach out. And God bless you for doing what you do, man. Thanks a bunch.
All right. Thank you.